Andrew Jackson, the seventh President of the United States, has been regarded as one of the most popular leaders of this country. Due to his distinctive character and his time as a war hero, his presidency was also filled with moments that shaped how people view him. Through his various trials and tribulations, this man has faced over 78 years of life. Jackson ultimately proved to be a man that was fiery and passionate, and took nothing from anyone. While it's important to judge a president based off of their decisions, it is also important to learn everything about them so that we can paint an image that represents them. Here we will discuss the early days of this boisterous man and hopefully see some of the events that shaped who he was as a person.
Pleasure meeting you. So if we're talking about the life of someone, we have to start from the very beginning, right? Can you elaborate on the upbringing of him as a child?
Now, when we think of Andrew Jackson, he was oftentimes seen as one of the most popular U.S. presidents in American history. Now, even with that, we know he was also one of the most reviled for his many actions and his very misdeeds, dealing with both Native Americans and with the general government. But the one thing that all of these lead to, and the one causation we are to believe is the main reason for all of these crazy actions, was mainly through his childhood. Andrew Jackson was born in Lancaster, South Carolina on March 15th, 1767, to his mother Elizabeth and his father Andrew. In addition, he had his two brothers, Hugh and Robert. But before Andrew Jackson was even born, his father would die in a tragic logging accident that would leave them fatherless.
No! Your father's dead! Father! No! No!
His widowed mother actually wanted him to become a minister, but Jackson's actions quickly shot down those hopes. At a young age, he was already cussing, fighting, and pranking.
So he's your stereotypical troublemaker, I would assume, right?
No. He wasn't per se a troublemaker. He was an agent of chaos. To put things in perspective, he literally joined the Revolutionary War at the age of 13.
13?
Yep, 13. He went along with his brothers to fight in the war, and that's when the second tragedy occurred. At the Battle of Stano Ferry, his brother Hugh died of heat stroke. Then, 2 years later, he and his brother Robert were captured by the British. As you would expect, Jackson took no orders from the British. So when one British soldier asked him to shine his boots, Jackson refused, and as such received a nasty scar across the face. A while after, their mother arranged for them to be released by the British. After that, Jackson's brother died of smallpox. But then his mother had to go to Charleston to serve as a nurse and care for soldiers. Sadly, she contracted cholera and died thereafter, making Jackson an orphan at the age of 14.
Where do you go after that?
Well, for a little bit, he lived with other family members, but then he promptly left to go have adventures in Charleston. He had some inheritance from his grandfather back in Ireland. Luckily, he managed to finish school, and he found a temporary job as a teacher, even though he hated studying.
Yeah, I didn't think Jackson would hold a job like that for a very long time.
You'd be surprised to hear he actually became an attorney at the age of 17. It took him about 3 years, but eventually he got his license to practice law. As well, he used to work at other various general stores. to earn some extra income.
How did other people see him at this time?
After a while, he somewhat gained a reputation as a very charismatic man. He was ambitious, and he loved to gamble and go to the tavern.
Interesting. Well, I also wanted to bring up his tendency to duel. I heard that he didn't really take any sort of insult from anybody.
Ah, yes, he definitely had a fair share of those. One of the more notable duels was over the honor of his wife, Rachel. A horse race turned violent with a man named Charles Dickens after he made some rude remarks concerning Jackson's wife. Being the hot-tempered man he was, Jackson swiftly challenged him to a duel. But the duel didn't go so well. Both men were severely wounded as a result. Scandals and duels hurt Jackson's reputation, and he had to retreat to Tennessee.
Oh, wait. This was around the War of 1812, right?
Yeah, right around then, I believe.
Alright, well, I'm gonna have to stop you right there. We have someone else coming in to cover that area of his life, so thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming.
Well, based off the last interview we had, we can tell that Jackson had a very eventful childhood, per se. But what about later in life? How did his nature affect the career of this man?
Because of his rambunctious personality, he had quite a few run-ins with problems over the years. Today, however, we're going to be talking about the parts of his career as a general that helped him reach his levels of fame. His involvement with the War of 1812 is what started it. During this war, Andrew Jackson was a mere common man who no one expected to lead an army. Yet, he did exactly that, and became a general for the U.S. Army's Southern District. Everyone was amazed at how Andrew Jackson came up with incredible battle strategies, even though he had no prior military experience. These strategies were crucial to helping Jackson fight off the Creek Indians at the Battle of Tohopeka.
Surrender. You stand no chance. If you surrender now, I will let your women and children go free. But for the men, I cannot say the same, for your crimes against the Union are despicable.
We'll never surrender.
Well then, charge!
For the Union!
Stop! Go on the cannons, you fools.
All right.
Fire!
This war was pivotal for the Union and Andrew Jackson's reputation, as his clever tactics allowed the Union to have a clear edge in this battle. He used the cannons not as weapons, but as distractions. They were a diversion in order to begin the real attack at the back of the village, with the assistance of the rival native tribe, the Cherokee, also known as the White Stick. This clever flank was crucial in their victory.
They got cannons. We gotta go get them.
It's time to surround them. For the Union!
For the Union!
After his success in the battle, the U.S. War Department awarded Jackson the position of Major General in the U.S. Army over the 7th Military District. He was ordered to create peace with the natives that were involved in the battle. So, in 1814, he met with the native leaders and had forced them into signing the Treaty of Fort Jackson, which made them surrender nearly 23 million acres of land and forced the natives to relocate to smaller reservations.
Sure, that's not all right. What else did Jackson do?
Jackson also had another major role in the War of 1812, which was the Battle of New Orleans, where he gained a majority of his fame.
How so?
Britain had turned their attention towards the United States after they had finished their war with France, so they sent fresh troops to the U.S. Jackson heard of the rumored invasion through New Orleans, and being the bold character that he was, Jackson made a questionable decision to invade Spanish-controlled Florida and take out the opposing British and native forces.
Wait. Where's the part he becomes a hero, though?
We're just about to get there. Jackson went back to New Orleans, Louisiana, where he composed a unique army. It was made up of normal soldiers, volunteered militia, freed blacks, Creoles, allied natives, and even some pirates. The problem was that he was greatly outnumbered and lacked experience compared to British forces.
Don't tell me he actually pulled that off.
Surprisingly, he did. After a few weeks of light skirmishes between the U.S. and British forces, Britain finally led a fully fledged attack against the defenders of New Orleans. And, shockingly, the U.S. came out on top, driving the British forces out of Louisiana.
I assume they still pretty hard after that, right? I mean, the US were the underdogs after all.
They really did. It wasn't until a year later, however, when the Treaty of Ghent was ratified, ending the War of 1812. As you would guess, his victory in New Orleans really made a name for himself.
I mean, you think he would have a hatred for the British, right? I mean, as a kid, he lost his family to them, he was cut by them on the face, and now he had to face them in war as a general. So were there any events that clearly showed his hatred for them after this?
Yeah, there were definitely some conflicts with the British. Even after the War of 1812, although the war was technically over, due to the terms and conditions of the Treaty of Ghent, another conflict arose. Again, under questionable authority, Jackson and his army invaded the Spanish territory of Florida and took control of many of its ports, leading to conflicts with the Seminoles in the First Seminole War. The Seminoles were another collective group of Native Americans and even included runaway slaves who sought refuge within them.
Hold the line!
During this time, Americans still had a bitter taste for the British, and as soon as Jackson figured out that 2 British men were helping the Seminoles, Jackson became enraged and decided to hunt them down, executing both by hanging one and shooting the other.
Wow, that's a little extreme, don't you think? Couldn't that cause some conflict around his reputation?
Jackson's actions were condemned by Congress, but applauded by the populace, who favored him because of his gung-ho attitude and relatability as a common man. As you can tell, the role the British played in his tragic childhood definitely had an effect on his actions as a leader.
Thanks for coming. Thanks for reminding me. Well, we can see that Jackson had a bit of a free will and kind of did it as he pleased. I'm sure his fiery temperament caused him a lot of problems in office based on his actions as a general. Can you elaborate on that?
It definitely caused a lot of conflicts between him and others. Part of the reason is, like you were saying, he felt strongly about many things and often did as he pleased. When someone does not meet eye to eye on his views and opposes him, he immediately sees them as an enemy. It was very, you're either with more or against me sort of mindset. He deeply valued loyalty.
I suppose we could look more into that during his presidency. Can you start from the very beginning of his political career?
Before we start off, I just have to say I love Jackson a lot, so I'm sorry if I sound a little biased. But oh yes, I got to talk about the dumb election of 1824. He totally should have won that election, as he won the popular vote, but not the majority, as there were 4 candidates. As a result, the decision for who would have been the next president was made by the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Henry Clay. God, I hate that man. Anyway, he cut a deal with Jackson's main opponent, John Quincy Adams, because neither of them liked Jackson at all.
A deal? What do you mean?
Henry Clay guaranteed John Adams a spot as president if he could appoint him as Secretary of State. Obviously, Adams took the deal because who would pass up such an easy victory like that, right? Many people, especially Jackson supporters, call that a corrupt bargain. And I definitely agree with that because that was some bull.
Mr. Adams, how would you like to be the next president of the United States?
How so?
Well, that's easy. You just make me the Secretary of State. And it's a deal.
Sounds easy. Deal.
Mr. Clay, what? That's preposterous. I have a feeling that you're going to use power for your own self-interest rather than the interests of the Union. Another is that many of the things you believe in are unconstitutional, such as the item of slavery. You wish to take away my constitutional right to own slavery and the rest of the South.
Mr. Jackson, you know exactly how I feel about you. Besides, it's a done deal.
So, when did Jackson finally become president?
Literally, the next election, a corrupt bargain and an increasingly democratic culture led to Jackson winning the election of 1828 by a big margin, leaving Andrew Jackson the winner of the battle between himself, John Quincy Adams, and Henry Clay. Unfortunately, his wife Rachel died during this time, adding another layer of sadness to this man.
I'm sure the death of his wife added on to his fiery attitude. But I've heard he was a very passionate man during his presidency. Can you explain the nullification crisis? As I've heard a lot about that with him.
Ah yes, it all started because of tariffs placed on imports to reduce the competition of foreign manufacturers with American manufacturers. The South, who relied heavily on foreign imports, saw this as unfair. They accused the government of helping the North at the expense of the South and threatened to secede from the Union.
Oh wow, I don't think that would go well for the South, or specifically South Carolina, right?
Jackson saw this as a threat to national unity and believed they were disgracing the founding fathers, and rightfully so. Since the state is threatening to secede, Jackson was to go to South Carolina later and threatened to hang the first person he saw, which was definitely one of his coolest moments in my opinion.
How could you bring dishonor to your forefathers who founded this country? Such disgrace. If you continue this nonsense, I'll personally come down there and hang the first man I see.
There are two major events later in his presidency, the Indian removal and the bank crisis. We should probably go over them in chronological order, so we will start with the Indian removal.
Oh, this is the one where the Indians were forced to migrate to the West, right?
Well, you are partially correct. Any Indians who did not want to assimilate into the white culture were forced to migrate. However, when whites needed more land later, certain states were pressured to move them, but they couldn't. Only the US government could. As a result, Jackson signed the Indian Removal Act, allowing the forced removal to happen, which resulted in the Trail of Tears. The Supreme Court said this wasn't right, but being Jackson, he did it anyways.
Oh wow, he's definitely a character sometimes, I guess.
Definitely. But next we have the bank crisis. It was time to renew the National Bank, an idea put forth by Hamilton, which most higher class men agreed upon. But not Jackson. He killed the bank, believing it only benefited the rich businessmen who want to start new industries and not the common man, thus assuming that the bankers would manipulate the money given to them, making it seem more risky to the lower class. He proposed that the money in the National Bank should be redistributed to state banks.
Uh-oh, how did that come out?
One of the things that caused more drama was the fact that Jackson vetoed the bill. It was greenlit by stages of the government, but when the time came for him to give the final say, he flat out vetoed it. Many questioned how fair this was for a president to have this much power, and we still wonder that today as well.
I guess I shouldn't be surprised by that either. He was very dedicated in his head and couldn't really be stopped, right?
His image as the common man definitely helped with his popularity. I wouldn't be wrong if I said that he was willing to die for them. God, I love this man.
Well, I'm sure there are very other interesting and other important aspects of his life, but I think if we kept talking, we'd be here until next year.
I'll gladly talk about him if you want.
No, that won't be necessary. I think we're running out of time, so thank you for your time. It's been a pleasure.